The spacecraft touched down gently on the pale, dusty surface of the planet. The protagonist, David, stepped out slowly, taking in the strange world around him. The sky was a soft green, with thin clouds drifting lazily across it. The ground beneath his boots felt firm but unfamiliar, a strange mix of rock and soft sand. He could see the distant structures of the research facility rising like glass and metal towers. They shimmered under the alien sun, tall and elegant, unlike anything he had seen on Earth. David's heart raced. He had been preparing for this day for months, ever since he had been chosen to visit the planet and meet the interstellar delegation. He knew his role was important. Humans had never had such direct contact with an alien civilization before. One wrong move, one careless word could change everything. He adjusted his jacket nervously, taking deep breaths to calm himself. As he walked toward the main hall of the facility, he noticed movement near the entrance. At first he thought it was one of the researchers, but then he realized it was someone, or something else. A figure stepped into the light. David froze. She was tall, taller than most humans, with smooth, radiant skin that seemed to glow softly under the alien sun. Her eyes were large and bright, reflecting colors that shifted with her movement. Every detail of her presence spoke of elegance and authority. It was the alien princess. David felt a mix of awe and nervousness. She moved with a quiet grace, each step measured, deliberate. She wore a flowing robe that shimmered in the light, its fabric unlike any material on Earth. Her hair, or something like hair, was long, flowing, and moved as if it had a life of its own. David noticed the small gestures she made, slight movements of her hands and tilts of her head, and he realized they were full of meaning. Her expression was curious, cautious, but also something else, something he could not name. The princess paused at the entrance, her eyes meeting David's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Neither of them spoke. Yet David felt he understood her reaction perfectly. There was surprise, certainly. There was recognition, though he had never met her before. And there was a silent question, one that demanded honesty and careful thought. David swallowed hard, trying to meet her gaze without faltering. A soft hum filled the air as the automatic doors of the facility opened. Scientists and officials moved around, but the princess's attention remained on David. Her presence seemed to command the room. People instinctively gave her space, bowing slightly or stepping aside. David felt small in comparison, but he also felt a strange pull of curiosity. Who was she really? Behind the royal composure, what thoughts and feelings might she hide? He stepped forward, keeping his movements slow and careful. "Hello," he said softly, unsure if that simple greeting would be understood or accepted. The princess tilted her head slightly, observing him. Her large eyes seemed to study every detail, the way he held himself, the nervous tension in his shoulders, even the pattern of his breathing. It was as if she could see past the surface, into his intentions and thoughts. David noticed that she did not speak immediately. Instead, she moved closer, but cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance. Her gestures were subtle but deliberate. A hand slightly raised, a small nod, the faintest shift of weight from one foot to the other. It was clear she was aware of her own power and the effect she had on him, but she was also curious, not hostile. Her reaction spoke volumes as the title of his mission now seemed to come to life before his eyes. Inside, the research hall was a mix of human and alien technology. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing data that David could barely understand. He caught glimpses of alien symbols, flowing lines, and moving lights. Scientists moved quickly, adjusting controls and making notes. But despite the busy environment, all attention seemed drawn to the princess and her careful observation of David. Every step he took, every glance he made was met with her calm, measured gaze. David walked toward the main area, keeping his eyes respectful and his movements deliberate. He could feel the weight of this encounter pressing on him. He had read reports, seen images, and studied the language patterns of her species, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of her presence. She was more than just a figurehead. She radiated intelligence, awareness, and a subtle warmth beneath her royal exterior. He reached a small platform where he was expected to stand for formal introductions. The princess stopped a few meters away, giving him space. Her eyes lingered on him, and for a moment David felt that she could read his mind. He realized how carefully he needed to think before speaking. Every word, every gesture mattered. This was not just diplomacy. This was the beginning of something much larger. something that could define the relationship between humans and her people for years to come. The silence stretched. David could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He noticed how her eyes softened slightly as she observed him. There was no fear in them, no hostility, only cautious curiosity. He found himself daring to smile, and to his surprise, the princess gave a subtle tilt of her head in response. It was a small gesture, but to David it felt like acknowledgement, even acceptance. A researcher approached, offering a translator device. David put it on, grateful for the help, but he realized that much of the communication in this first moment would be unspoken. The princess's reaction, the way she looked at him, the way she held herself, was already telling a story. It was a story of curiosity, intelligence, and a willingness to understand. It was a story that spoke volumes without a single word. As they stood there, facing each other for the first time, David felt a strange mixture of excitement and calm. He knew that this encounter would be remembered, not just for the formal discussions to come, but for the simple, powerful moment when two beings from different worlds truly acknowledged each other. The princess's reaction was not just polite or ceremonial. It was genuine, and it left an impression he knew he would carry forever. Finally, the princess moved slightly, indicating that the introductions could begin. David took a deep breath, ready to step forward into the formal meeting, but he could not help stealing one last glance at her. Her eyes held the same quiet curiosity, the same subtle intelligence, and the faintest hint of emotion that made him realize he was part of something extraordinary, something that could change both their worlds. The doors closed behind them and the meeting began. But David's mind kept returning to that first moment, the moment when he arrived and the alien princess appeared. Her reaction had said more than words ever could, and he knew that this encounter was only the beginning. After the initial introductions, David was guided through the research facility. The halls were wide and bright, filled with soft humming sounds and glowing panels that displayed data in a language he was still learning to understand. He followed closely, careful not to stumble or appear clumsy. Every so often he glanced toward the alien princess. She moved gracefully, her every step deliberate, her eyes occasionally meeting his. There was a quiet intelligence in her gaze, as if she was constantly analyzing and learning. They reached a quieter section of the facility, away from the bustling scientists. This area was smaller, with smooth floors and walls that shimmered with soft light. Here the atmosphere felt different, less formal, more personal. David realized that this was the place where he could finally speak to her more directly, without the watchful eyes of officials interrupting. The princess stopped and turned to face him fully. Her eyes, large and expressive, seemed to search his face. David felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand her better, but words seemed both necessary and fragile in this moment. David, he began cautiously. I have come to learn and to understand your world. She tilted her head slightly, her lips parting as if she wanted to respond. But then she remained silent. Her reaction was not one of confusion, but of careful consideration. David realized that she was weighing his words, measuring their meaning. It was as if she could sense his intentions without him needing to explain too much. They began to walk slowly down the corridor. David noticed small details about her. How her hands moved gracefully as she gestured, the way she paused to look at the patterns on the walls, and the faint expression of curiosity on her face. Each motion was precise but natural, showing both her training as a princess and her genuine interest in the world around her. David found himself asking questions, first about the facility, then about the planet itself. How do you manage to keep such a clean and organized environment? He asked. She responded finally, her voice soft but clear like a gentle melody. We have learned to respect balance and harmony. Everything here has a purpose. Disorder is rare, and when it appears, it is corrected. Her words were simple yet full of meaning. David felt a small smile appear on his face. There was wisdom in her simplicity, a clarity that he found rare even among humans. He realized that her role as a princess was not just ceremonial. She was thoughtful, observant, and deeply aware of her responsibilities. As they continued walking, the princess paused by a window-like panel. Beyond it, David could see the planet's surface stretching into the distance, vast plains, strange rock formations, and a sky that shifted in shades of green and blue. He could see small creatures moving in the distance, moving in patterns that seemed both natural and organized. "Do you see them often?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Every day. They are part of our ecosystem. We observe them, but we do not interfere unnecessarily. There is much to learn from watching quietly." David admired her answer. There was a calm patience in her voice, a respect for life and understanding that he had never encountered in his own world. It made him feel that this encounter was about more than just diplomacy. It was about learning to see and respect life in ways he had not considered before. They reached a small lounge area, a space designed for conversation and reflection. There were comfortable seats and soft light that made the room feel warm, despite its metallic structure. The princess gestured for David to sit, and he obeyed, careful not to overstep. She sat across from him, her posture straight yet relaxed, her eyes still attentive. David took a deep breath and asked, "What is it like living as a princess? Do you ever get tired of responsibility?" The princess's gaze softened. For the first time, David saw a hint of emotion beyond curiosity and observation. There was a flicker of thoughtfulness, maybe even loneliness. "Responsibility is not tiring," she said slowly. "It is a part of who I am, but it can be challenging to balance duty with personal desire. There is always a choice to make, and each choice has consequences." David nodded, understanding more than her words could fully express. "I think every leader faces that. Even in human governments, decisions are never easy, but you seem to carry it with grace." She tilted her head, and her lips curved slightly in what David interpreted as a small, polite smile. "Grace is learned, not given. We observe, we reflect, we adjust. Every action matters." There was a pause, and David felt the weight of the moment. He realized that her reaction to him, her careful observation, her subtle gestures, her quiet attention, was a kind of communication. She was speaking volumes without saying much, showing him that she was not only a leader, but also an individual capable of understanding, curiosity, and even empathy. Encouraged, David asked, "Do you ever wonder about humans? About our world, our choices?" The princess's eyes seemed to brighten slightly. "Yes," she admitted. "We have studied humans for a long time. There is much to admire, much to question. Human behavior is unpredictable, but often full of creativity and resilience. It is fascinating." David felt a rush of relief and connection. Her words, soft and deliberate, made him feel seen, not as a visitor or a diplomat, but as a person. He realized that the princess's reactions, her subtle expressions, were more meaningful than any formal greeting or ceremony. She was curious about him, about humans, and that curiosity bridged the vast distance between their worlds. Time seemed to stretch as they continued talking. David shared stories of Earth, of everyday life, of people and their struggles and joys. The princess listened intently, occasionally asking questions, sometimes just observing quietly. Her reactions, small nods, attentive eyes, slight changes in posture, spoke volumes about her engagement and interest. Finally, a gentle alarm sounded in the facility, indicating that the formal meeting was about to resume. David and the princess stood, and for a brief moment their eyes met again. There was no need for words. The connection they had formed in this short time was clear. Both understood that this encounter was special, unusual, and meaningful. As they walked back toward the main hall, David felt a new sense of respect and admiration for her. She was more than a princess. She was a thinker, a learner, and someone capable of quiet strength and genuine curiosity. Her reactions to him, subtle and unspoken, had already taught him more than any document or report could convey. When they re-entered the bustling hall, the formalities began again, but David carried the memory of their private conversation with him. He knew that understanding her reactions, noticing the small details, and appreciating the subtle communication would be just as important as any words exchanged in the formal meeting. The princess returned to her role in the ceremony, graceful and composed, but David knew that beneath that exterior was a thoughtful, curious individual, and he felt privileged to have seen that side of her even for a brief moment. As the meeting continued, David realized that their journey was just beginning. The first connection had been made. The princess's reactions, her curiosity, and her careful observation had spoken volumes, and David knew that in the days to come, understanding her and learning from her would shape not only his experience, but potentially the future of human and alien relations alike. The formal meeting had ended, But David could not stop thinking about the alien princess. Her presence had left a lasting impression on him. Even among the bustle of the facility, her calm intelligence and quiet curiosity lingered in his mind. He found himself wandering through the halls, drawn to a quieter part of the facility where fewer people moved. It was a space designed for reflection and observation, with soft light and large windows that looked out onto the planet's horizon. To his surprise, the princess was already there, standing near a viewing panel. She turned slightly as he approached but did not move away. Her eyes met his, large and bright, filled with the same curiosity and thoughtfulness he had noticed before. David felt a strange comfort in her gaze. It was not formal or distant, but direct and engaging. "David," she said softly, her voice carrying a gentle melody that made him pause. "You seem to be thinking a lot today." He smiled faintly. "I am. There's so much to learn here. About your world, your people, and you." The princess raised an eyebrow slightly, not in surprise, but in quiet interest. David realized that she had been observing him closely, just as he had observed her. Her reaction, small, careful, yet genuine, made him feel seen. She did not rush him, did not demand answers. She simply watched and waited, encouraging him to speak in his own time. "I want to understand," he said finally, "what it is like to live here, to grow up in a world so different from Earth. I want to know what it means to be a leader and how you handle all of it." The princess turned to look out the window, her gaze stretching over the vast plains and alien mountains. "It is not always easy," she admitted. "Being a leader means observing, listening, and deciding. Some decisions are simple, some are difficult, and sometimes you must choose between what is expected and what feels right." David nodded. He could see the weight in her posture, the way her shoulders held responsibility. Yet there was also a calm strength about her, a quiet assurance that came from experience and understanding. Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them was deep. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked cautiously, unsure if it was too personal. For a moment, she did not respond. Then her lips curved slightly in a soft smile. "Sometimes," she admitted, "leadership can be isolating. There are few who truly understand the pressures and choices you face, but I am not unhappy. I am learning, and I am growing." David felt a wave of empathy for her. Despite her regal appearance and extraordinary abilities, she was still, in many ways, very human, or at least capable of human emotions. He realized that behind the titles and ceremonies, there was a young individual navigating complex feelings and responsibilities. Her reactions, her small gestures had already told him more than her words alone. They walked together to a small observation deck. The glass stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the planet. Strange, colorful plants swayed gently in the breeze, and distant rivers sparkled in the alien sunlight. David was mesmerized by the scenery, but he noticed that the princess was watching him more than the landscape. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes curious and attentive, as if she wanted to see his reactions, to understand him better. "Do you enjoy Earth?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. David thought for a moment. "I do. It is full of life, diversity, and surprises. But it is small compared to this world. Seeing your planet, the way everything works together, it is amazing." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Earth is interesting. We study it, trying to understand humans, your choices, and your culture. There is much to learn from your world, just as there is much to learn from ours." David felt encouraged by her openness. "Then maybe we can help each other," he suggested. "Share knowledge, understand each other better." The princess looked at him, her large eyes reflecting both the alien sky and a flicker of emotion he could not name. Her reaction was subtle, a slight softening of her features, a small inclination of her head. But to David, it felt significant. It was as if she was agreeing silently to explore this connection further. For the next hour, they spoke quietly. David shared stories of Earth, everyday life, human traditions, struggles, and triumphs. The princess listened intently, occasionally asking questions or commenting thoughtfully. Her reactions were subtle but meaningful. A nod here, a raised eyebrow there, a brief smile that seemed to acknowledge both his words and his intent. Each gesture spoke volumes about her engagement and curiosity. At one point, David told her about a community project he had worked on, a program to help children learn science and technology. The princess's eyes lit up slightly, and she leaned forward, intrigued. "Education is important," she said. "Knowledge shapes choices. Children who learn are prepared to make decisions that benefit their people. I admire that you focus on the young. David felt a surge of respect for her. Even with all her royal responsibilities, she could appreciate the value of small human efforts. Her reaction, calm and deliberate, showed thoughtfulness beyond her years. He realized that connection did not require grand gestures. It could be built through attention, understanding, and shared curiosity. As the conversation continued, the princess revealed small details about her own life, lessons she had learned, experiences that shaped her thinking, and the importance of observation and patience. She did not boast or seek admiration. She simply shared, trusting David with fragments of her world. Her reactions, her careful gaze, gentle expressions, and attentive posture, showed trust and a willingness to connect. David noticed that time passed quickly. Hours had gone by, yet it felt like minutes. The planet's soft sunlight began to shift, casting long shadows across the observation deck. He realized that their private conversation had given him insights he had not expected. Not just about the princess, but about diplomacy, understanding, and the quiet power of observation. Finally, the princess stood and straightened her posture. "It is time for me to return to my duties," she said softly. "But thank you for your openness. Your words and presence are noted." David nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. "Thank you, princess, for listening and for being yourself." She gave him a slight, polite smile, a small gesture yet full of meaning. Her reaction, as always, spoke volumes. She did not need to say more. The connection between them had already been established. As she left the observation deck, David remained by the window for a moment, watching her move through the corridors with her calm, deliberate grace. He felt inspired, aware that this encounter was shaping his understanding in ways he had not anticipated. Her reactions, subtle and thoughtful, had conveyed wisdom, curiosity, and a quiet humanity that transcended worlds. When he finally turned back to the facility, he knew that part 2 of his journey had deepened his understanding. The princess was more than a figurehead. She was a learner, a thinker, and someone who could connect across the vast distances between their worlds. David felt privileged to witness her reactions, to share these moments of quiet insight, and to know that their story was only beginning. The next day, the atmosphere at the facility was tense. David could feel it as soon as he stepped off the transport platform. Scientists and officials moved quickly, exchanging urgent messages and glancing toward the princess, who stood calmly at the center of the hall. Her posture was straight, her expression composed, but David noticed the slight furrow in her brow. Something was happening, something serious. He followed closely, trying to understand the situation. A disagreement had erupted between the human delegation and the alien council. Differences over the interpretation of data and protocols had escalated, and a peaceful discussion now threatened to turn into conflict. David's heart raced, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He had seen the princess react before, and he trusted that her judgment would guide the outcome. The princess moved forward, her every step deliberate and controlled. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "We must listen carefully," she said, addressing both sides. "Hasty decisions will create misunderstandings. We will resolve this calmly." Her words had weight. People paused, their gestures slowing as they absorbed her presence. David noticed that her eyes scanned the room constantly, observing the faces, the subtle movements, and the unspoken tensions. She was analyzing, understanding, and guiding without force. Her reactions, calm, measured, and intelligent, held the room together. The human leader spoke next, his tone firm but respectful. "We want to ensure that our research and intentions are clear. We mean no harm, but some of your protocols seem unusual." The princess tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. She listened closely, nodding at certain points, her large eyes reflecting attentiveness and quiet judgment. Then she turned her attention to the alien council. "And you," she said softly, "please explain your concerns clearly. Misunderstandings arise when words are assumed without clarity." David watched, impressed by her ability to manage the tension. Her reactions, small gestures, attentive gaze, and carefully chosen words, controlled the room more than any command could. She did not shout or demand obedience. She simply guided, calmly and firmly, creating an atmosphere of focus and consideration. Minutes passed and the discussion continued. David observed the subtle cues she used. A slight nod to acknowledge understanding, a pause to let someone finish their point, a careful tilt of her head to indicate contemplation. Each reaction spoke volumes, demonstrating wisdom and emotional intelligence that few humans could match. At one point, a human scientist raised a concern about a research procedure, fearing that it might disrupt the alien ecosystem. The council responded defensively, explaining that their methods were time-tested and safe. Tension spiked, but the princess stepped forward. "Both sides share the goal of understanding," she said calmly. "Conflict arises when we assume intention is harmful. Listen, observe, and ask questions before judging. This is the only way forward." Her voice carried authority, yet it was gentle. The room seemed to breathe collectively, as if everyone present recognized the value of her reaction. David realized that her presence alone had prevented the situation from escalating further. She was not just managing a disagreement. She was teaching patience, observation, and mutual respect. David felt a surge of admiration. She was extraordinary, not just in appearance or status, but in her ability to influence without force. He noted every subtle movement, the way she leaned slightly when speaking to someone, the way her eyes softened when she acknowledged valid points, the small gestures that conveyed understanding and empathy. Each reaction was deliberate yet natural, and it shaped the entire discussion. As the meeting progressed, David noticed the princess glance briefly at him. Their eyes met, and in that moment he felt a silent connection. She did not need to speak. Her glance conveyed reassurance, acknowledgement, and trust. David understood that she relied on him, trusted him to act thoughtfully, and recognized his efforts to understand the complexities of her world. Finally, after a long discussion, the room began to calm. The human delegation adjusted their approach, taking into account the concerns of the council. The council, in turn, moderated their tone, responding with careful explanations rather than defensive arguments. The princess's presence and her reactions had guided both sides toward a peaceful resolution. David felt relief and admiration. He had witnessed diplomacy at its finest, not through dominance or threats, but through calm observation, careful listening, and subtle, meaningful reactions. The princess had maintained her composure, influenced the discussion, and preserved harmony, all without raising her voice. Her reactions spoke volumes, teaching lessons that no words alone could capture. After the meeting, the princess took David aside. They walked through a quiet corridor, away from the eyes of officials and council members. David could sense the weight of the day on her shoulders, but she carried it with grace. "You handled yourself well today," she said softly. "Your observations and patience were noted." David felt a mixture of pride and humility. "I could only follow your example," he admitted. "Your reactions guided everyone, including me. I learned more from watching you than from any briefing or document." The princess gave a small approving nod. Observation is often more powerful than words. Actions, gestures, and silence can communicate truth more clearly than speech. You understood that, and it will serve you well. They paused by a viewing panel looking out at the planet below. The alien landscape stretched endlessly, beautiful and complex, a reminder of the responsibility the princess carried. David felt a renewed sense of respect for her. She was not just a figurehead or a symbol. She was a thoughtful, intelligent, and empathetic leader, capable of guiding her people and teaching lessons to those from other worlds. As they stood together, David noticed how her posture relaxed slightly in private moments. The tension of her role eased when she was away from the public eye, revealing glimpses of her true self. Her reactions, subtle smiles, soft glances, and quiet gestures showed depth, humanity, and thoughtfulness. David realized that these moments, though brief, were more revealing than any formal speech or ceremony. "You trust people easily," he observed cautiously. The princess considered this, her eyes thoughtful. "Trust is not given blindly. It is observed, measured, and sometimes tested. But it is necessary. Without trust, understanding cannot grow." David nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He understood that the connection they were forming was delicate but important. Her reactions, careful, intelligent, and genuine, had already taught him lessons he could carry beyond this planet. Finally, as the day drew to a close, the princess returned to her quarters, and David was led to his own. He reflected on the events, realizing that part 4 of his journey had shown him the power of calm observation, the importance of measured reactions, and the subtle ways a single individual could influence many. The princess's decisions and demeanor had prevented conflict, guided understanding, and revealed a depth of character that left a lasting impression on him. As he prepared to rest, David knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to learn. But he also knew that the lessons of today, the power of observation, empathy, and subtle guidance would remain with him. The princess's reactions had spoken volumes, and he would carry their meaning in his heart as he faced whatever came next. The next morning, the atmosphere at the research facility was calm, almost serene. David walked through the halls, feeling a mixture of anticipation and sadness. Today he would be leaving the planet. The days spent with the alien princess had changed him in ways he had not expected. He had come to learn about her world, her people, and diplomacy, but he had also discovered a connection that went beyond words. The princess appeared in the main hall, as graceful and composed as ever. Her presence was calming, and David felt his nervousness ease immediately. She greeted him with a slight nod, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and understanding. It was as if she could sense his thoughts and emotions without him speaking them aloud. Her reaction alone made him feel acknowledged and appreciated. David approached her slowly, careful not to break the silent rhythm between them. I want to thank you," he said softly, "for everything. For your guidance, for your patience, and for allowing me to see who you really are." The princess's eyes softened, and she gave a small approving smile. "You have learned much," she said quietly. "But it is not just about knowledge. It is about understanding. Understanding comes from observation, reflection, and the willingness to listen. You have done all of these well." David felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that the connection they had formed was not fleeting. It was subtle, quiet, and built on respect, curiosity, and shared experience. Her reactions, her gestures, her expressions, the way she listened, had taught him more than any formal lesson or report ever could. They walked together to the viewing platform one last time. The alien landscape stretched endlessly before them, vibrant and full of life. Rivers sparkled in the distance, and strange plants swayed gently in the breeze. David felt a deep appreciation for the beauty of the planet, but he was even more aware of the princess's presence beside him. Her calm composure, her thoughtful gaze, and her quiet strength made the world feel even more extraordinary. "Will you remember us when you return to Earth?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a gentle curiosity. David nodded. "Always. This experience, your reactions, your guidance, it will stay with me. I will share what I have learned, and I will remember the way you led, listened, and observed." The princess gave a small nod, as if acknowledging both his words and his sincerity. There was no need for grand statements or formal promises. Their silent understanding was enough. Her reaction spoke volumes, conveying trust, respect, and a recognition of the bond they had formed. As they prepared to say farewell, the princess stepped closer, maintaining her graceful distance. She extended her hand slightly, a gesture that was simple yet filled with meaning. David hesitated briefly, then took it gently. The touch was brief, but it conveyed connection, acknowledgement, and mutual respect. He felt that in that single gesture countless words were shared, words that could not be spoken, yet carried a depth of emotion and understanding. "Safe travels, David," she said softly. "Remember what you have seen and learned. Let it guide your actions and your thoughts, and know that your presence here has mattered." David nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Princess. You have changed the way I see your world and my own. I will never forget this." She gave him a small, gentle smile, and for a moment her eyes reflected something personal, something beyond her royal composure. David realized that despite the distance between their worlds, despite the differences in species and culture, they had connected in a meaningful way. Her reactions had shown him empathy, curiosity, and trust. He would carry these lessons with him forever. As the shuttle prepared for departure, David took one last look at the princess. She stood by the platform, calm, composed, and observing him with those large, expressive eyes. He noticed a subtle tilt of her head, a small softening of her expression, and he felt a quiet sense of closure mixed with longing. Her reaction, so subtle yet so profound, left an impression he knew would remain with him. The engines hummed softly as the shuttle lifted off the ground. David watched as the facility grew smaller beneath him, and he could still see the princess standing there, her posture dignified and calm. She did not wave or call out. She did not need to. Her reaction, her quiet, thoughtful presence was enough to convey farewell, respect, and understanding. During the journey back to Earth, David reflected on the past days. He had come to this planet expecting to learn about alien technology and diplomacy. Instead, he had learned about connection, observation, and the power of subtle gestures. The princess had shown him that leadership was not about authority alone, but about awareness, empathy, and the ability to communicate without words. Her reactions had spoken volumes, teaching lessons that no manual or protocol could convey. When the shuttle finally entered Earth's atmosphere, David felt a mixture of relief and melancholy. He was returning home with a wealth of knowledge and experience, but he also carried the memory of the princess's reactions, her gestures, her expressions, her quiet grace. These memories were not just visual. They were lessons, guiding principles and reminders of the impact one individual could have through observation, thoughtfulness, and empathy. Back on Earth, David shared his experiences with colleagues and officials. He spoke of the planet, its environment, its culture, and its people. But most importantly, he shared the lessons he had learned from the princess. He described her reactions, the subtle ways she observed, listened, and guided others. He emphasized how her calm presence could resolve conflicts, build understanding, and create trust. People listened, fascinated by his accounts. Yet David knew that the most important lessons could not be fully captured in words. They lived in his memory, in the silent exchanges, in the thoughtful gestures, and in the meaningful reactions he had witnessed. These were the moments that had truly shaped his understanding. Days turned into weeks, and David found himself thinking about the alien princess often. He remembered her gaze, her subtle smiles, the careful way she listened, and the quiet strength she displayed in every moment. Her reactions had left a mark on him, shaping not just his perspective on diplomacy and leadership, but also on empathy, patience, and the importance of observing before acting. Though he might never see her again, David felt a deep connection to the lessons she had imparted. Her presence, her reactions, and her thoughtful guidance had changed him in profound ways. He realized that some encounters, even brief ones, could leave lasting impressions, impressions that shape decisions, actions, and the way one views the world. As he looked up at the stars that evening, David felt a quiet gratitude. He had traveled across space to meet a princess, and in doing so, he had discovered the power of understanding, the importance of careful observation, and the meaning behind subtle, meaningful reactions. Her lessons would stay with him forever, a reminder that true connection transcends worlds, languages, and appearances. The alien princess had appeared when he arrived, and her reaction had spoken volumes. Those silent, deliberate gestures, the careful attention, and the quiet understanding had shown him more than any words ever could. And in that, David found inspiration, wisdom, and a sense of hope for the future, both for himself and for the connection between their two worlds.